me from Utah, what a joy to have you on, is Adam Reeder, doing business as Professor of Rock. He's, of course, the social media phenom. You see him on YouTube. You see him on all the different channels. He's a historian. He's a musician. He's a fanboy. He's doing lots of things out of the memory of his father. How are you, sir?
Good to be with you, Robin. Thank you.
I gotta say, I gotta not be that Chris Farley character in SNL. You know, when he was by Paul McCartney, and he's like, "You remember that time when you like this?" Because I've watched enough of your videos to kind of, it's transcendental. Like through you, like I got to meet heroes like Stevie Nicks and Sammy Hagar. Gosh, you've been on with Santana, with Journey, with Def Leppard. You were, when David Crosby passed away, somebody posted to your interview. Where did this all start? What was the inception of this?
Well, the inception of the channel, or my love of music?
Your love of music. Take me to the way back.
Well, going back, I grew up in a small town in Idaho, Blackfoot, Idaho. It's the potato capital of the world. And actually where I grew up was even smaller than that. It was a place called Moreland, which was in Snake River. I went to Snake River High School, but it was a little farming community. My dad is where it all started. My dad, Steve Reeder, was a painting contractor, and he had a love for music. He grew up, of course, in the 60s, and then, graduated in the early 70s and had, so 50s, 60s, 70s, I grew up on all of that music. And of course I grew up in the 80s. So I loved the music that I was hearing on the radio. So my dad would drive around. He had an old Ford pickup, and, he would go around to different jobs. And I was not blessed with being mechanically inclined. I'm not. My dad is very mechanically inclined, and so are my brothers. But I for some reason, that was not given to me. I was kind of a a geek, kind of a nerdy kid, and I loved music, and I loved that my dad would tell me the stories behind the songs. Stories about the Beatles and Creedence Clearwater Revival and the Stones and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and even back in the 50s, Elvis and Chuck Berry and even Motown, Four Tops and the Supremes. And so I grew up on all kinds of music. I loved it all. And he would tell me, he would quiz me. And what was fun about that is he said, "All right, I'll take you to get you a pop if you can name who sang the song or the year this song came out, or what chart position, was this a number one hit, And I was fascinated with all of the factoids and the history there. So I went into the library. I went in, bought magazines, whatever I could get my hands on to learn about music. And what my favorite thing was, though, that my dad would tell me the stories of the songs from his perspective. He would tell me this song, I heard the first time I heard this song, I was 11 years old. And he told me the first time I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, it changed my life overnight. The world.
How many artists have said that? I mean, I lost track of how many people say, I saw Ed Sullivan, I saw that happen, and then it was done for me. I wasn't going to stay in algebra. That was it.
That was it. That was, like I say, it was the night of a million bands, because, overnight people started bands overnight and said, I think I could do that. That's what the Beatles, the magic of the Beatles is. They looked up on the TV. They didn't see this, this incredible. Elvis was like, he was beautiful. I mean, he was just incredible. He looked like Adonis. But the Beatles looked like what everybody else kind of looked like. Like they looked like a bunch of working class schlubs. People looked up and said, I think I could do that.
That's right. I'm reminded of the Life magazine photo. Again, I get inside baseball like you do of Benjamin Orr. Grew up outside of Cleveland as Benjamin Orzechowski, was the bassist and founder and vocalist of the Cars. We recently had their biographer on the show, and there's a Life magazine photo of him getting his hair done like the Beatles. There was a style.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, back in the 60s and doing it. And you imagine that, and you step back from it and you draw a through line from that to MTV and Live Aid. And you realize the kind of the collective soul or the ancestral DNA of a lot of the people we know today in the music industry.
Totally. I love Benjamin Orr. He's one of my favorite singers. But yeah, my dad, he raised me on that, and he would tell me those stories. And that was my way of having a closeness with him.
Hmm.
because we didn't have a lot in common. We had two things in common. We had baseball and music. And he was a Dodgers fan. I was a
So am
Yankees
I.
fan. I've always been a Yankees fan. I think
Oh,
it
I'm
was
sorry.
because of all the history. Yeah. Don Mattingly was the reason I became a Yankees fan because I just loved how he played the game. But we, he would tell me baseball trivia too, and I loved watching that. But music more than anything, and so I would listen to Casey Kasem, who was really my hero, my inspiration. I listened to the American Top 40 every week. I didn't miss it. I'd try to record it, but it's such a long show. You have these Memorex tapes, and you couldn't get the whole
They
thing
couldn't get
down.
the
But
whole
I
thing
would
on
write
it.
down all the chart positions.
C30, C60, C90, go.
Right. And they didn't even have the 90
The 90s back
minute
then.
tape back in the early 80s, right? So it was a 60-minute. But I just remember loving that. And Casey taught me a lot about music, just listening to him every single week and writing down the chart position. So that was my influence. And then, of course, I saw MTV at friends' homes because we didn't have
We didn't
MTV
have cable. Yeah.
till 87, till the summer of 1987. And
Same here. The first video I turned it on, it was Kim Wilde's doing "Keep Me Hanging On." I just
Oh,
remember that
yeah.
first moment.
Okay. Sure.
So that time stamped it for me. That was trending.
Totally.
With Adam Curry and everybody else. But let me tell you, it's funny, you mentioned, so you talk about this. I'm in the car with my kids occasionally on a Sunday. My wife will turn on FM radio. It's not a part of my life much anymore, but they just verbatim rerun Casey Kasem from the early 80s. And it's such a different headspace. The primacy of FM radio to us, of cassettes to us, of waiting for the DJ to shut up so you could hit the record button, of dialing, I know I-95 FM and Y100 in Miami, calling them nonstop, or 97 GTR to get a song requested. And I feel like the late Michael Landon in Little House on the Prairie, when I turned to my kids, I was like, see, this is how we used to know what was number one. They're like, can you just shut up and put it on Spotify? Like, you don't know how good you have it. Even 20 years ago, I had a janky cassette adapter to let my Discman play these songs.
Totally.
And suddenly I feel like the old man, and here it is, your dad passing the baton to you. Was he reading liner notes? Was he reading album notes in the 1970s? Did he have an 8-track? Like, how did he get all this information?
I think it's just things that he remembered. And some of the things that he told me didn't turn out to be, that they were, the telephone game where they came through and were played several times. Like he told me that Eddie Money was married to Ronnie. The Ronettes, Ronnie Spector, and that of course didn't turn out to be true. They just sang that duet
together,
"Take Me Home Tonight." But it was enough to get me fascinated in going to our little library that we had, which didn't have a lot of books. They didn't have a lot of books on music, but they had enough. And then I was buying Rolling Stone and Circus magazine and Hit Parader and all the magazines that they had back in the day. Sometimes a Smash Hits would come in, which was more of a UK magazine. And then, I remember when I went into the library and they had microfiche. Remember the microfiche?
Yes, and you could see the newspaper reviews.
Totally. And you could see Melody Maker and all the British magazines, the New Music Express. And that's when I started to get into new wave music and alternative rock was coming in and that kind of thing. So I would say that what my dad gave me more than anything was that sense of wonder of the in baseball music kind of have that. There's not a lot of things that have that, where it has that such a rich history, but not only the rich history, it's the magic of the facts that, the first time this happened and the only time this ever went to number one, or those kinds of facts that would come in, and that magic of watching a baseball game, but the magic of feeling. I think I feel music. I just feel music very deeply. And it's that connection, the checkpoints in my personal history. When I hear a song, and like anybody, it's a time machine, right? It takes you right back to those moments that make you ache inside, because you know that you can't go home again, but you can get close with music. It's the only thing that can do that. I've always said that smell or scent is probably more powerful, I think, than hearing something. But there's nobody that's invented an iPod that can give you a scent at will. If they could do that, I think that guy would be a trillionaire. But because that you smell something and it immediately takes you back. But that is few and far between. I think music, you can play anything and it takes you back to that moment and you're reliving it in your mind, in the theater of the mind. And so I'm grateful to my dad for giving that sense of wonder, the closeness with him, realizing that we didn't have a lot in common, but we did have that in common. That was paramount. And then I think also just, the passion to go and find the stories behind the song. I mean, that's what I'm always more curious about. How did this person create
Sure.
this? Why did they do it? The whys, the hows, the whats, the all that. So I'm grateful for that.
Full disclosure, I'm Roben Farzad. We are joined by Adam Reeder. He is a professor of rock, the enormous social media phenomenon. Just check out his YouTube channel. Over 13 years of doing this, he's interviewed upwards of 900 singers, bands. I'm thinking, gosh, Stevie Nicks, David Crosby, Santana, Journey, Def Leppard, Sammy Hagar. It's like a who's who. I envy you just on the Stevie Nicks alone. When I'm sitting next to somebody on a plane and I get to what I do for a living, I was like, if there's one dream interview you could have, who would it be? I'm like, Stevie Nicks, man. We talk about cocaine. We talk about the dime-shaped septum in her, the hole in her nose. We talk about Don Henley, Joe Walsh. But anyway, I digress. So YouTube, this is now on the cover of it was a big feature story in the Hollywood Reporter. It is TV. It is the black hole eating up all of media. Maybe when we were growing up, 25 years ago, clearly cable and MTV were king, and the cassette and the record. And 40 years ago now, 45 years ago, I'm dating myself. YouTube, I think, was acquired by Google in 2006. It was a small curiosity. Now we take for granted that you could upload 4K gigabytes at a time. When did it suddenly occur to you that I control my own destiny? I don't need a Viacom. I don't need a, Friday Night Music or anybody to call me and co-opt me. I am the captain of my own ship.
Well, it was really kind of an accident because we were talking to a lot of streamers out there back in the day. Been going for 13 years. The YouTube channel is not quite 6 years old yet in terms of me putting up content. So, we had so many deals that would come that were really, really close. We had a deal with Walmart. They were going to put us in every single Walmart out there and put us on Walmart radio. And this was back when Walmart was many years ago. They were going to compete directly with Netflix and those streamers through Vudu, but they decided to do it in a different way. And so we were one of the first.
What, like a Walmart Plus subscription would get you no ads on Professor of Rock?
Yeah. So It was going to be. We released like 15 short documentaries, mini documentaries on Walmart on Vudu, and that's when they were going to get into that space, and then they decided not to. So we were close on a lot of different deals with different companies, Sony and such. But when the pandemic hit, we kind of were forced to go on to YouTube. And what happened is we had a deal with Vivo, which Vivo is owned by the record labels, and they put out the music videos. There's artist channels on Vivo where you can find all their music videos, and they want to do a Professor of Rock Vivo channel. So we did that, and we put out like 12 documentaries with Journey, Don't Stop Believin', and we had the story of, Dreams of Van Halen and Santana and so forth. And then I had one video up that I did on a YouTube channel that I only put up just to send out links to a few things. And I had one that I had messed around with where I counted down the top 5 hidden gems from the 80s. It was just me talking. And so all of a sudden, that video got like almost 1 million views in about a month. And it had more views than any of the views on Vivo. And I thought, that is weird, because I'm interviewing artists like Toto and Journey. Why would anybody care what my opinion is on the top 5 hidden gems from the 80s? And I had this young kid that was working for us at the time, and he knew about YouTube, and he said, you got to stop questioning that. People love your knowledge and they love your personality. You guys got to go for it. Let's make this a 3 or 4 times a week show. And so we started doing that. Then the pandemic hit. We went on full time where we were putting out videos Monday through Saturday, and it just grew. It just grew from grassroots. People were sharing it, commenting. They were passionate about it.
Oh.
And all of a sudden we were getting all these subscribers, and now we're up to 1.5 million. I had no idea that it would grow to what it has. And so it is great to have the freedom to produce any kind of content that we want. I
So,
agree.
of course, this is full disclosure, and sometimes we do get into the nitty gritty of business. I mean, a lot of creatives don't want to sully their hands on this, but look like you didn't have any choice. Were you at this fork in the road where you had to take investors? Like, I need equipment, I need cameras, I need a travel budget. I can't just back of the envelope this anymore.
Yeah, you know, before that, we actually had investors, and the problem is when the pandemic hit, our investors got hit hard in the market. So they said, "Look, we can't really fund this anymore." To where because we were trying to make a documentary series to put on, like I said, these other channels, and so YouTube, we were kind of forced to go on, and they thought we were crazy. They're like, how can you make any money on YouTube? But I said, give me 3 months. In the first month, we made $300. So I was, that wasn't going to be great evidence that we could make money. But then the second month, we made $3,000. So they were like, okay, that's 10x growth. Let's see what we do in the third month. Third month, we doubled that to 6,000, and it just kept going up and up and up from there. And so they continued to see that there was a huge increase each month. So they would put in just enough for us to keep going. I have a small team of people that would edit and put together the videos. So we did that, and we were in the black within about 8 or 9 months, and for the first time in doing the whole thing, and we've never looked back since. Now, there have been some struggles on YouTube lately because they changed the algorithm, and with AI content going up and dealing with copyright claims and all the things that people in my space deal with.
Yeah, that's actually what I want to hit you on. So, I see that Rick Beato obviously is big in this space. And I
Oh,
see
absolutely.
sometimes when he wants to do Eagles, he's saying, I got to worry about Irving Azov here. I wonder if Irving Azov is going to come after me for mentioning him. But you can kind of hint at Hotel California, but you can't play a version of it because these guys, bless them, they are litigious. Ever since this whole YouTube Napster thing cracked, and we're going to go back to what happened 26, 27 years ago with Napster and the inception of all this. There are some people out there that just fight it. There are others that are like, this is not my enemy. This is a fan. I'm not going to be stingy if there's going to be, if I'm going to have Sammy Hagar on, and then is it going to be a fight among the Van Halen brothers, now one of them dearly departed, and Sammy Hagar if I play an excerpt from 5150? How does that work? Do you have to have ground rules up front?
Well, I mean, copyright claims, and Rick will tell you this. It's true. I love Rick. He's a friend and a great guy, and does a tremendous job. Great historian and music educator and interviewer and such. And so grateful to have met him. And we talk, and he has never lost a claim when he's fought it. It is fair use. I've known that for many, many years before even talking to Rick, because I had a lawyer, actually the father of fair use, that actually went through our whole catalog before we went on YouTube when we were doing these other deals to make sure that we were within the confines of fair use. And so I know it very well. I've studied it, commentary and critique and historicals, all that. And so I know that we fit under that because we're not using the whole song. We're using a piece of the song to demonstrate what we're talking about, to educate, to talk about the history. So, it is fair use. That's why when the copyright claims are fought, they're won every single time, because it is. Problem is that YouTube really doesn't have a policy there, and they let that kind of happen. And I get frustrated by that because, creators should be protected. Fair use should be protected. It is law. And it's really not the artist so much. I mean, you bring up Eagles, it's maybe a little different, but most of the artists, they're fine with that because we're sharing history. I mean, we have a lot of young people on our channel that are learning about these bands. They're hearing these songs for the first or second or third time, and they're going out and they're buying them, they're streaming them. So all it is doing is promoting the catalogs and the history and putting them out there. And so it doesn't make any sense. It's the record labels are shooting themselves in the foot. But sometimes what's happening is that the catalog is being bought up by an investment group, and they're just sending out. They have
AI who does it. This is, we're really
exactly.
living in Kubrick right now, where I get, if I use things for fair use, or we use something, I'll get a warning that it can't be played in all countries. You get the same thing
Yep.
on Instagram. You get it on other channels, and I just it's tough. But if you're fearless and you know that you're sufficiently lawyered up and you could flick it away, then more power to you. Adam Reeder, by way of illustration, Professor of Rock, I want to play an excerpt of your interview of Sammy Hagar and how beautifully you illustrated the year 1986, which was very formative to me, like in the prime of my just about to get MTV, my just about to discover compact discs. Let me play that for our listeners.
And I always say that if you want to party, but you're a partier too, but if you want to party, listen to David Lee Roth. If you want to be inspired, you listen to Sammy Hagar. That's how I felt when I first heard this record and I heard Dreams. There are songs, in my opinion, that are game changers. They are paradigm shifts. They change the way that you look at the world. Dreams was that song, and you've written a few of those. Let's talk about 5150 and Dreams.
What I brought to Van Halen was just who and what I am. Not an accident. It wasn't contrived. It was Sammy Hagar, who and what I was at that moment, but very inspired.
Coming back, you were listening to some of the Professor of Rock interview of Sammy Hagar. He's, of course, had more than 800 recording artists on. Gosh, Stevie Nicks, Santana. I cannot go through how many. David Letterman, you had him on. He interviewed you, vice versa. How do you make an overture to somebody like Sammy Hagar, who I, of course, admire from afar? I came of age. I am deeply in that mindset of this huge controversy of the tension coming out of 1984 and Van Halen and Eddie breaking up with David Lee Roth and Eddie doing Michael Jackson. You have all these things that you could just bring to mind quickly. Like you knew the controversy, the behind the scenes, the skepticism of the median Van Halen fan for Sammy Hagar, and like, boom, he's right at home talking to you.
Yeah, Sammy's great. I've been fortunate, excuse me, to interview Sammy, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. And I did a live event with him. We do, it's actually, we're starting up again in June, but it's called Professor of Rock Live, where we actually have the artist on stage, a ticketed event, and they tell the story of their life in like 9 or 10 songs, and then they play the songs. And so it's really great. I've been, fortunate to have Sammy on that. But yeah, 1986, I'm with you. I knew of Van Halen, of course, from 1984. My dad actually bought the Jump single. That's how cool my dad was back in the day. He was bringing all kinds of records home. And so, of course, I knew, and I'd seen through Friday night videos and night tracks.
For those of us who didn't have MTV, there was Friday night videos, and one of the hosts was Larry David. People literally cannot believe this. Like Larry David with a tuft of hair.
That's right.
For those people who had to slum it out and watch this Friday nights on what was it, NBC? It was like the version of Saturday Night Live, right?
It was awesome. Yeah, Friday night I'd talk to my parents and let me stay.
Letting you stay up. Yeah,
I'd have a friend over, and we would just be just blown away by these music videos. So of course I saw Jump in Panama, and Hot for Teacher, which was very scandalous. But but yeah, David Lee Roth was the ultimate frontman. When Sammy took over, I remember buying 5150, and I could not believe the voice I was hearing. This Sammy Hagar does not get enough credit as one of the great.
I mean, heck, he didn't get any credit in the Alex Van Halen autobiography, which I thought was an epic snub. That's just completely revisionist history. I understand DLR was your initial frontman, and these guys had their back and forth, and it was always the tension. It was who was the bigger, who was edging out the other person? Was it David Lee Roth or was it Eddie? And we see Eddie was tormented behind the scenes. Of course, Valerie Bertinelli has the memoir coming out. But what's great about this is it's not even an orphan story. Like from the vantage point of Sammy Hagar, it's almost like Rashomon. I come in, it's 1985, it's 1986. You illustrate the studio 5150. This is in the prime of the party animal Eddie Van Halen, smoking, drinking everywhere. Their 40s, clearly intimation of cocaine use. Not a lot of emphasis on marketing or acoustics or anything, but that was that. And he just parachuted into it and put out what's really just a rockin' album in its own right. I mean, with the entire world saying, no, you can't do that.
Totally. I know that I'll get a lot of flack for saying this, but for me personally, I mean, I love both singers. I love David Lee Roth. I think he's an incredible frontman, and I love the party, lifestyle, that, the whole party that the Van Halen was, those first classic albums. But 5150 will always be my favorite Van Halen album. And the reason being is because it has one of my favorite songs of all time. I had to name my 10 favorite songs of
Not
all
Summer
time.
Nights or 5150.
Dreams.
Dreams is beautiful.
For me, Dreams, it epitomizes that relationship that Eddie and Sammy had, where
Absolutely.
Eddie could play whatever he wanted because he wasn't worried about the vote, because David Lee Roth,
Gave him grief about the keyboards.
It was only so he could only go so he didn't have a huge range, but Sammy could sing into the stratosphere, and so there was no worry about what he could do. So Eddie was truly inspired. If you listen to Dreams, if you're,
I know it. I won't even say it's a guilty pleasure anymore. I'm open about it. Or why can't this be love? Like, what other car would you rather be in a 1987 Trans Am? Popping that cassette in. My kids will never know that joy with the false leather interior and the sticker on the front. But I'm dating myself. Adam Reeder, I have to ask you, what was your first ever LP? I know mine. It was a single. Dancing with Myself by Billy Idol. I remember the chrysalis on the little record. It was 1981 or 1982. What was yours?
Oh, well, my first record so there's, the records that I took from my dad because he had such a huge collection that I would sneak from my dad, including Zeppelin 4 and such when I was growing up. But the album that I bought with my own money, that was really my first album, I kind of put the three of them together because I don't remember exactly. Probably Michael Jackson, Thriller, but
it was my first cassette.
Yeah, but Bruce Springsteen.
The first one I bought. The chrysalis one was a promo.
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, Michael Jackson, Thriller, and Billy Joel, An Innocent Man, that all came out within about a year of each other. And those three albums are like my ultimate albums because I bought all those with my allowance, my own hard-earned money. And they meant something. They were special to me for that reason. But Michael Jackson, Thriller, I mean, I'm so excited about this Michael Jackson movie coming out at the end of April. I think that Michael Jackson, I've been thinking about this the last few weeks. A lot of people don't understand. Like you can talk about Taylor Swift. You can talk about whatever artist is the big artist right now. Nothing will ever compete with Michael Jackson in 1983, 1984.
1983, and both of us, we didn't have cable, and I had to go to my pal Ross Turian's house. His parents were divorced, but his mom let us come by, and you knew when Thriller would be airing, and they let you watch the entire unedited thing, and it cross-pollinated so beautifully. You'd go back, beat it, want to be starting something. It also reminds me where I bought these tapes was the Peaches Records. I don't know if you guys had that. But the smell of cider, there were these wood crates. They were big on the East Coast and in the South. And you go in and the place smelled like cypress, the wood. And you just associated it like, yes, take my $16, take my $18, even if only there were 2 songs on the album. But I got to say, and this is not about me, but you know that there was a magical place between the radio, the mall, MTV.
Oh, yeah.
I just feel like my kids and others won't know.
No, I agree. I think that on Instagram, I love the 80s stuff that I follow 4 or 5 big 80s channels that collectors from the 80s will show pictures, and they'll show one guy's a collector and he's got all kinds of stuff from the 80s, and it just takes me back. I love it so much. But yeah, I mean, the mall, I remember we would have to travel about 30 minutes to the mall that we had close to us. When you walk into this Pine Ridge Mall, the first store is KB Toy Stores, and the second
store and Hobby,
Musicland, yeah. And then Walden Books was around the corner. Yeah. So those were the 3 places I went. And of course, the most time I spent was in the record store. And even in Musicland, it didn't seem like it had a lot there. But for me, we had this little thrift store that had records in it. And that's where I bought some of my records and tapes. That was, in the little town. But if I got to go to the mall, then I had a huge selection. I could get whatever I wanted. And so I agree with you. Those were great memories. But Michael Jackson Thriller was that album. And I don't think I think the 80s had this more than any other decade, where there were actual albums that they sounded like greatest hits albums. Every song was great. Michael Jackson Thriller was part of that, right?
Def Leppard, Pyromania. I mean, these were neck and neck. I mean, Van Halen, 1984, and the others. I say it again, I sound like an old man because we're already talking about a time that was north of 40 years ago. And, you know, we
Yeah.
used to think of the 80s as 20 years ago, as 10 years
Oh,
ago.
I know. When
So
people
much
say,
has since changed.
I know. When people say 20 years ago in 2005, I have to go lay down because I'm like, 20 years ago was 1987. You know,
That's
my
what I would
mind
say.
can't handle it. My mind can't handle it. I mean, because so yeah, I'm with you. It messes you up a little bit when you think about it.
Full disclosure, stay with us. This show airs on NPR, Spotify, Apple, all of the fine podcatchers. And please subscribe and watch us on YouTube. We're still trying to figure YouTube out. I'm, of course, on Instagram at Roben Farzad. You could find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure, as I told you, that I still have a MySpace or Friendster handle if you want to look us up on Netscape. You could, of course, follow all of these at one neat link, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. Please subscribe, rate us, call your girlfriend, recommend us to your mother-in-law. I take all listeners. And, of course, every week, you can listen to me on NPR's Here and Now and watch me on CNN. And a shout out to our radio listeners on WVTF, Radio IQ, across the great Commonwealth of Virginia. We are out west in Ventura on KPPQ and in Asheville, North Carolina, out east in the gorgeous mountains of Asheville on WPVM. Holler if you too would like us on your air. My DMs are always open.
Thank you.
It's interesting because an album, sometimes you'll hear it when it first comes out and you really won't understand it. It can take 30 years to really understand it so deeply in your heart. And that's how the Soul Cages was for me. As my father passed away a few years back and we had a complicated relationship, but music was the thing that brought us together. So that was the positive. And that was always an album that I turned to through my relationship with my father from, you know, as a teenager all the way up until his death. And I know that that was an inspiration for you. And jumping into all this time about a boy wanting to bury his father at sea over the objections of two priests. I love this song. I love the way that you tell the story and how it unfolds.
It's really about my hometown. I was born in a town called War's End, which was the end of the Roman wall. Our house was built over a Roman army camp.
The Romans built this place. They built a wall.
And at the end of the street was a shipyard. It was halfway between the city of Newcastle and the North Sea. We built big ships. Most of my relatives worked in the shipyards, all were seamen. And so the sea and the symbols of the river and the boat were very powerful to me.
If you are just joining us, my guest this week is Adam Reeder. He's the professor of rock, the social media phenom, a music enthusiast, a musician, a historian, a fanboy, just like myself. You were listening to some of his interview with Sting, where, of course, Sting opens up about the importance of his father. To get people to open up like that to you and to share the universality, because, you know, I do what I do for my father and the memory of my father, and it's so formative for you that it could have been any other way in potato country. And a person who's, you know, you didn't communicate in other things, and you did it through music, and through music at a time of such a ramp up of pop music. You go from the 50s and the 60s, the Beatles, into the 70s, and 8-track and vinyl and cassettes and MTV. And here we are talking over a Wi-Fi connection in the year 2026.
Right. Yeah. I think it comes down to when you're talking to anyone, it's like Christopher Walken said on Saturday Night Live in the cowbell skit, you know, when he says, you know, I'm just a normal person. I put my pants on one leg at a time. But when I put on my pants, I make gold records, you know. I mean, that's hilarious. But
and then the dude, Jimmy Fallon breaking character, like that entire, you know, that's already a quarter century ago, you know.
If Bruce Dickinson says that we should play more cowbell, we should probably listen to him. Yeah, it's great.
I got a fever.
Yeah, but I love that statement because it's true. We're all the same, and we all want love. We all want to have great experiences, but I think more so, we're all somebody's son. You know, we're all somebody's. Some of us have had or daughter, son or daughter, or whatever it is, and some of us can say that we're all somebody's father, brother, sister, mother, family is what I'm saying. You know, I think about my son just showed me a homework assignment that he had last year. He just got it back. He had to write an encyclopedia of his life, and for every for every letter he would put what the things that define him. And for A, he put Adam Reeder, my father. And the excerpt that I read, I was in tears because he said, my dad is my hero. He's always been I have many heroes, Bruce Springsteen. He takes after me. He loves all the music. His favorite band's the Smiths. He loves the Foo Fighters. He loves all that. But he said, my heroes in music are these guys and Queen and so on and so forth. But he said, my dad is my number one hero. And I look up to him some ways. That right there means more to me than anything that you give me an Oscar, a Grammy, an Emmy, anything out there. Nothing compares with that moment that I had last night. That's as good as life gets when you can have that kind of a relationship with your loved ones. I mean, I love my kids and the struggle to find that relationship with my dad when we didn't really see eye to eye on many things, but we had music and baseball. And my son, you learn when you go through your own experiences, you learn from that and you say, I'm going to raise my kids in a different way, or I'm going to, because I remember being heartbroken that, I felt like, well, maybe my dad just doesn't care. And it wasn't that. He had his own business and he had so many pressures and stress. And then you figure that out when you have your own.
When you become your father yourself.
Yes.
This was your convergence point.
Exactly.
And so many people had that convergence point. Go back, listen to a recent episode with improv star Annie Serdich and others. I love that I know this. And if I'm having a coffee with you, I would tell you about my moment with my father as an immigrant. And I came here, and some of the first memories are listening to FM radio in his 1979 Oldsmobile, and we'd be Billy Joel's Big Shot. And, my mom going to beauty school, and we get a ride on the way back, and Betty Davis Eyes was huge in 1981.
I love
and
it.
it literally takes you there. Sometimes I have these waking dreams to it where the memories are soundtracked to these songs. But I have to ask you, seeing your shirt, it's great that you wore that, because I can now tell you, let's take it from that conversation of the Michael Jackson cassette in 1983 and the Billy Idol single record in 81, 82 to 1997, senior year of college. I'm in Edwards Hall and we're on an Ethernet connection, and my very first ever MP3 on my Pentium laptop was Everlong by Foo Fighters. And man, did I heat up that laptop. You could fry an egg on it by the many times I played Everlong on Winamp. Next thing you know, my neighbors are getting these sweet jobs in the tech bubble. They're buying CD burners for $2,000. They're burning CDs and everything. And this is a great moment. Fast forward to my first job in New York, and a bunch of us discovered Napster, and we stayed late at the office and connected the headphone speakers and had a Napster party. That changed everything. And where were you when all of this stuff went digital and you realized, oh my God?
Yeah, I started out in the teleservices industry. If you can imagine that, I opened up call centers across different towns in America, and I was a traveling operations manager for this, and so I love going to these different towns because it have record stores and bookstores that I could frequent, and so yeah, I was there. I remember downloading Napster and having those songs. It always drove me nuts though, because people would get things wrong. They would say "Walking in Memphis" by Billy Joel, and of course,
it was not that Billy Joel. Yeah,
so
and you don't know what you were infecting your laptop with.
You didn't,
right?
Exactly.
But by the time it hit LimeWire and Kazaa, like my kids cannot understand it. We don't keep a ring of CDs sitting around, but it was a rush to fill up a data CD with 120 MP3s.
Totally. Oh, yeah. Totally. It was awesome because I could find songs that I hadn't found before, right? It was that moment of finding B-sides and really rare songs that you'd hear in the 80s that you couldn't find on CD or on vinyl or what have you. And so there was a whole new wonder, because you could search anything. You could go out and find these obscure songs and records. And so that was really cool that way. Now, I mean, that sense of wonder has been taken a little bit because you can find anything. I mean, Spotify is at your fingertips. And like you said, Kids will never know what it's like to hope that the DJ doesn't talk over the beginning of the song you're trying to record. They'll never know the struggle and the struggle of the tape getting eaten and taking the pencil and trying to wind it back and fix the tape so that you could listen to your tape again. And if your batteries died on your Walkman, that was it. I talk to my kids all the time when they were growing up. They say, "Dad, tell me a cool story from the 80s." And, they're really fascinated by the fact that you could go into a video store, and especially in my small town, we had Buff's Video, and they had one copy of the movie, maybe two. I mean, if it was a huge movie, it was two, but if only one. If they didn't have it, you didn't watch it. So I remember riding my bike, a BMX bike with my cousin, Mark, a guy named Mark Thompson. We would drive down to Buff's Video or ride our bikes down, and we would wait. And they had this little tape drop where they could drop the tape through this little chute. And we would wait for Predator, to come. We wanted to see Predator. And so
be kind, Adam, rewind.
Right. So it was that experience of wonder. And because we had to wait for things, we didn't have Amazon where it'd be, delivered in 2 days or the next day. It was 8 to 10 weeks. Right. So I think because it was harder to get and harder to come by, there was more value to it. We couldn't wait for that, and when we finally had that moment, it was worth it, or maybe it wasn't worth it. So that.
But here, Adam, I would posit that it is now accrued. The worm is kind of turned. If it's been 26 years of digital just eating everything, my industry, print, magazines, clearly TV, cable TV has gotten hurt with cord cutting. Clearly, Napster did its thing, the recording industry, all the consolidation. You see no shortage of major artists selling the rights to their catalogs to get the cash infusion that's treated like on Wall Street, like a fixed income instrument, right? They're making money where they can. They can on touring and merch, and everybody else is kind of screwed because of the pennies of streaming. We've had David Lowery on our show from Camper Van Beethoven and Cracker. And in fact, we called that show Rock Prof, not knowing, what this is. So don't mix up the two, because he was a professor at the University of Georgia kind of teaching these. But it's been a time of sameness, and everybody's streaming out there. And unless you are somebody like Taylor Swift or some of these megastars who can demand your own rents, I say that it helps you because these major A-listers are now amenable to the slow cooking of your show, to the thoughtfulness, to the fan, the curated kind of audience that you bring in and the research that you do. Do you see what I'm saying? Uh-huh. It's absolutely the obverse of a commodity. I can't get that on just any Spotify thing. That's you. That's something that you built, and it's sui generis to you.
Yeah, it is neat that you can go on and have these hour or 2 hour of interviews that you can watch on YouTube from many different people. I wish I would have had that, because I remember seeing, somebody like, I was a huge Smiths fan. So when Morrissey was on Carson for the first time, or maybe it was Jay Leno, I'm trying to remember, but there's no interview with him. It was just, or maybe like, hey, how's the tour going kind of thing, or whatever artist you would see.
It's awful. I hate life. I hate touring.
Right. You never got a sense
Stop
of
Stop me if you've heard this one before.
Oh,
no, anyway, go ahead.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, you didn't get those deep dives. You never got that. And so I remember sending away for a VHS copy of the Smiths Complete, which had all their music videos on it in the early 90s. And I mean, it took, I tell my kids this, when you liked a band, like when I started liking the Smiths, it took me years to get all of their albums, to collect and to find things. It was really
you're talking liner notes. You're talking the Scantron, the machine, the microfiche at the library, squinting, trying to see the little reviews, doing keyword searches. I don't think people realize how brutally difficult this was. Pre-Nexus, you're waiting for print issues. You're waiting for Kurt Loder to say something on the MTV News, like a little tidbit here or there. And you didn't have podcasts. You didn't have this kind of granularity. Maybe
you earned it. You earned it, man. You earned your fandom for sure. When you loved a certain band, like Billy Joel's always been my favorite. It's probably because he was the first artist that I ever remember had more than one song, kind of thing.
Of course.
Like, I remember hearing It's Still Rock and Roll to Me, and then hearing My Life and realizing it was the same artist. And I liked both the songs. And so,
and you think about something as intensely personal as Second Wind.
Yeah.
right? Intensely biographical, that's not something you would read in a liner note.
You're
That's
only
something that a
human.
person
Yeah,
would have to tell you about the torment in his life and the alcoholism and the ideation and everything else going on.
absolutely.
And we are in the era when people can talk about that. It's
Yeah.
understood.
In
It's
fact,
accepted.
Billy Joel's documentary, he went over all that. It was very much a warts and all documentary, and he talked about the music and the inspiration there. So it's a renaissance right now in terms of that, and having that at your fingertips. It's amazing to be able to get to know these artists as people, as human beings.
Adam Reeder, Professor of Rock, in the 5 or 6 minutes we have left with you, I got to tell you, I go out to lunch, I go to town on this Stevie Nicks story. It should have been a drunk history, the backstory of Stand Back. I can't read it a million times, and people think I'm lying when I'm bringing it up at dinner and everything, that it was effectively the sequel to Little Red Corvette.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, almost like in a Chappelle, Charlie Murphy thing, Prince shows up in the studio and Stevie Nicks is coked out, and she's like, Prince, I was thinking that I knew the second part to it. And he's like, I will play the keyboards in perpetuity. And she never saw him again. You cannot make that up, whether it's drunk history, whether it's Chappelle, whether it's Rashomon. We were never told. Like, it's not like she sat down in front of an aquarium and a VJ in the mid 80s and said, yeah, I was, with my husband, I was only married to him for 36 hours. And then I said, oh my gosh, we heard this. And this was the sequel to Little Red Corvette. But these stories are now coming out like left and right. Song Exploder, which is a hate listen of mine because I love it. And I was like, why couldn't I come up with this? Like when they had the backstory to Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and you hear all the pieces coming together and they structure it. Close us out. What are some of the craziest stories you've heard in this? What are some of the out of body moments you've had where you have to say, oh my gosh, if my dad could see me, if 1983, 1984 Adam could see me talking to this person opening up about this, I want to freeze my life right now.
Well, one of them was Billy Idol. When I interviewed Billy Idol on a Professor of Rock Live, and we were talking about our fathers and we were tearing up, I thought, and after the show was over, my friend, I've known for many, many years, all the way back to grade school, said, well, no matter what happens in your life, no matter how bad things get or good things get, you can always, I want you, the last thing to remember every time your head hits the pillow, you made Billy Idol cry. And I didn't make him cry. We were just talking about something very emotional, both of us. But it was one of those moments where I thought, Billy Idol was Rebel Yell. I mean, seeing him, the ultimate rebel, to be able to have a conversation, a very deep conversation with him about our fathers, that was an incredible moment for me. Sting is one of my favorite interviews, to be able to talk deeply about Sting. And again, commonalities. We all have this in common as humans. We all have, no matter how big these stars get, how many number one hits, or, they play Live Aid or whatever, it comes down to the fact that their fathers, their sons, their daughter, it's family. And so we all have that connects us all, is that we want to give and receive love. And so those are incredible experiences. I remember another experience when I met Brian Wilson, because Brian Wilson's always been one of my musical heroes. And I made a list before I started of the 15 people I want to interview before I leave this world. And I've gotten, 8 or 9 of those. And up at the top was Brian Wilson, because of Pet Sounds and the Beach Boys and that incredible music. To be able to sit down with Brian and ask him about Pet Sounds, about God Only Knows, I thought, this is a pinch me moment. I would never have thought, when I was a little kid, listening to that 8-track of God Only Knows in my dad's shop where he painted and varnished cabinets, that I would be sitting here with Brian Wilson, hearing the actual story of how he put those counterpoint harmonies together. There's so many wow moments like that. And there's so many crazy moments. It's actually really good timing, because I got a greatest hits coming out of what I consider to be the 9 greatest stories in rock history. And one of them is, Strawberry Alarm Clock, Incense and Peppermint. They were trying to record that song and nobody could get the vocal down. And they had this random kid watching the session who was their buddy, who said, let me try it. And he nailed it. And all of a sudden they had this number one hit with this kid that wasn't even in the band, that was randomly at the studio. I mean, those are really magical moments. And there's so many stories like that in rock and roll that are just so incredible. And how Eddie Van Halen would use anything but the kitchen sink, and sometimes even the kitchen sink, to get a certain sound. The Motown guys, talking to Lamont Dozier, who wrote all those hits, what they would do to get the sounds on Motown, and Bob Dylan coming to Hitsville, USA and saying, hey, how did you get the sound on I'll Be There? And he said, oh, we got that from a broken tambourine. He's like, yeah, I know. You just don't want to share the secrets with me. Or he's like, where do you record it? And it's this little teeny room, Hitsville, USA. And he's like, here. And Bob Dylan thought he was pulling his leg, but that's really what they were doing. They didn't have the money for this.
Well, my poor man's version of this is in 2022. I'm going under for an adult male procedure that all adult men should get checked for this at a certain age. And they couldn't shut me up no matter how much propofol they gave me. And then finally they're about to kick it up and they play one of my favorite songs. They go like on the Spotify classic rock channel, and it's Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. And it starts with the Mick Fleetwood drums. And I was like, do you know the relation of this to Street Fighting Man? Oh my gosh, let me talk. And then they upped it and they shut me up. And I was like, I got to go under to the drums, before I got to tell them that it sounded like it was done on tissue boxes. But that's neither here nor there. I'm going to close with a wild card for you because we know that many obituaries have been written for MTV. Clearly, it did not survive the age of cord cutting. If you're going straight to channels like Vivo and YouTube to see music videos and to pull them up on demand, or to see little excerpts or snippets on Instagram or TikTok. And yet Paramount, which is now in the process of merging with Warner Brothers Discovery, management put out feelers about 2 months ago to all those people in the MTV diaspora. What would we do with that brand goodwill? It doesn't make sense to just shut it down and run ridiculousness all night. How would you resuscitate it for the age of, Professor of Rock and YouTube and Insta and social media?
Oh, that's a great question. And actually, you're onto something, because that's exactly what we're trying to do right now. We're going to create a version of MTV that will be an entity. You can go in and be a part of this. You can see all the music facts. But I would do it exactly the way that classic MTV was in the 80s, where you have music videos and then you have commentary in between from the actual creators and the rock legends and telling the story. Because when you hear a story behind a song and then you go listen to the song, it has so much more meaning. You can hear the things that were talked about. So to me, I wouldn't change much. I mean, I think people want an experience where they can go in and turn it on and it plays the music videos they want to see with the commentary that they want to see, the documentary part of it that they want to see. I think that MTV they overthought it. It was too much overthink going on there. People want it to be very, very simple. They want that nostalgia. They want that the way it was when they had the original VJs on there and they had their original programming that was music based. I mean, I was thinking about The Dance, Fleetwood Mac. That was an MTV production. A lot of people forget about that. They used to do those kinds of things that were really, really incredible things where you could get access that you wouldn't normally have in the Fleetwood Mac.
There'd be a world premiere and an exclusive, and you would get excited about it. And there'd be a couple of band members there in front of an aquarium or a blue screen or something. And there's still something about that, like that Casey Kasem is now dearly departed, right? But the ghost more than lingers on Sunday FM radio in the morning, on the way to church, when your kids are like, what is this? Or what is he talking about? It was the first time he heard that song. It's just us. And I guess we are old men and our kids are going to know this some days and say that, Dad, my dad would regale me with stories about vinyl and showing up at the video store and waiting for the thing to go click,
Yep. Oh, totally.
But let me tell you, I love connecting with you. And it's a really hamishy-menchy thing that you did to agree to subordinate your reputation enough to go on full disclosure with Roben Farzad. Adam Reeder, Professor of Rock. Tell us where we can find you.
You can find me on Instagram, and I don't post a lot there. Obviously, YouTube. I've got my podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, which is my episodic content just on podcasts. And then you can actually find me on my radio show, my syndicated radio show, Classic Rock You with the Professor, which if you don't have it at your station or you can call and request it. And they'll get it there. So
what you need to do is burn CDs and hand them out in Times Square. That would be,
I love it.
That would be counter programming, and then taking viral videos and everything. But thank you for coming on. You're always welcome to come back on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
Full disclosure, special thanks again to Ian Stewart. If you are listening to us on the radio, note that while we cut for broadcast, the entirety of every interview is on podcast, whether on the NPR app, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Find them all at one neat link, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. And recommend us to a friend. A shout out to our home station, WVTF, Radio IQ, Virginia's NPR news source. You can message me to carry us on your air. And catch me on both CNN and NPR's Here and Now. I'm Roben Farzad. Thank you for listening. Back with you next week.